Hare Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and I'm taking another question in my Bhakti Q&A series today. These are questions devoted to understanding Bhakti Yoga, the philosophy of yoga in general. If you ever have a question, feel free to submit one to me. You can email me info@nightlightastrology.com and put Bhakti Q&A in the subject line. So today's question is a really good one, and it is about the oracle. Is God the oracle, or is the oracle God? I turn to the I Ching often, so do I. So, because I'm a visual person, I often imagine an actual physical sage in my mind in front of me. Who are the oracles in the eyes of Bhakti Yoga? Are they separate deities or are they God? Sometimes I feel like I turn to God while casting the I Ching or choosing a tarot card. I know that Bhakti says that God is everywhere and everything, but is there a more specific answer to this question? Beautiful. What a great question. And honestly, it's something that I had to wrestle with quite a bit at the outset of my journey with Bhakti Yoga because I'm a diviner, right? I'm an astrologer. I do divination for a living, and I needed to reconcile my own practices and beliefs, as an astrologer with the introduction of Bhakti philosophy into my consciousness, as it was just like pouring in really fast, and I was really taking to it with all of my heart and soul in a sense. And then I was like, hey, wait, like, so who am I talking to when I do astrology? Similarly, I've had to ask questions about who am I talking to or relating to for 10 years of my life drinking ayahuasca, because those are some, in the Amazon, they'd say you're talking to plant spirits. You're working with plant spirits who are wise, sagely beings who inhabit the bodies of plants. And they are the teachers, healers, guides, mentors. um Whether you believe that or something else, but that's what I was told. And then, when it comes to studying astrology, you'll hear various answers as well. Well, you're talking to the gods. The planets are the gods or demigods or something like that. If you're a reader, it's not just that you're talking to the gods, it's that there are maybe spirits, literally, or spirit, maybe in like almost like a Christian sense. There's spirit or spirits that you work with as a medium or a channel or a diviner or a reader or something like that. So there's a lot of ideas that are thrown around out there about who or what we're communicating with when we're, reading an astrological chart or consulting the oracle with the I Ching or whatever. I don't think that there's just one answer to this. So I want to be careful in the way that I respond. And I'm going to do so by reading a section of the Bhagavad Gita. Funny enough, I read another section of this in another video I made. This is from chapter 9 of the Gita. Here's Krishna talking to Arjuna. So here's God talking about the nature of things, right? This is starts with verse text 8 in the ninth chapter. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again, and under my will, it is annihilated at the end. So remember, there's kind of almost like a cyclical universe quality where everything gets kind of sucked into the body of God and then breathed back out and sucked back in. And the material creation works in cycles like this, although the spirit souls that inhabit the universe are immortal and eternal. O Dhananjaya, all this work, now that would be the word for work is karmani, or like activities or karma, work, action. All this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. So one has to ask if that's the kind of God who really cares necessarily about, our concern when we approach the oracle over whether, Sheila will go out with me or something like that. Or, like, is God sitting there? If God is posed, seated as like neutral, detached in a sense from all things, not neutral as in unloving or uncaring or uninvolved with creation, but it's not like God has like some big skin in the game when it comes to like a lot of the concerns that we're probably approaching the oracle with. Like when I reflect on what people approach me with as an astrologer every day, love, money, sex, relationships, travel plans, the health of their parents. I mean, it's like pretty mundane stuff. I don't think it's that God has some kind of like, oh, I don't care about you, and all that stuff is really petty. But we know two things here. One is that it's not like God has some stake in this, like it's a death match between good and evil, and that God is really involved trying to, like fight some kind of cosmic battle in the midst of our lives. Instead, we're given this picture that all things pass and that all things come and go, and that there's creation and destruction in cycles, and that none of it like binds God or like involves God in like a way that's unhealthy. And of course, this is something that we're told as yogis throughout the Gita that we're to emulate. So there's something, in other words, about the very approach of our soul to an oracle that already suggests that we may be um, we may be getting out of position somehow in the flow of things. So, what does that imply? It implies that the right or correct use of an oracle is to get us back into a state of acceptance, surrender, detachment, not in a cold or inhuman way, but detachment from some kind of unhealthy egoic investment in the way that things are going. And if you read what the Stoics said, the Platonists said, the Pythagoreans said, the Hermeticists said, if you look at these mystical groups in the West, certainly if you look at Indian astrologers in the East, the purpose of astrology is to aid like a spiritual science in the cultivation of our spiritual enlightenment. It's a heavy word, but let's just use it. So you'll see astrologers in the West very clearly, for example, saying that, like, look, the reason that we study this as astrologers, the reason that we use this is to help a person understand the flow of time, the flow of karma, to accept destiny or fate, to accept the results or fruits of karma with an act of surrender to the divine. And that's the attitude, right? So if astrology is being approached in that regard, then it seems to me as though we are approaching the oracle with the attitude of surrender and devotion to God. And you certainly find that attitude among the ancient astrologers. You find straight out prayers to God. You find instructions to new students of astrology that they become pious, faithful, surrendered in the heart and soul to God. That the power of the planets and the ultimate overseer of the planets, or the gods that weave fate and destiny together in our everyday lives, still comes from God. So here is those two verses again. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is manifest and annihilated. So things come into being and go out of being through my intelligence, through my action and creation. So that should be the bottom line that we approach the oracle with as readers of any kind. And if we do, then I believe that whatever beings, whether they're demigods, planets, spirits, whatever we're communing with, if that's our attitude and we approach with that prayerful reverence, this is why I'm doing this. I'm helping other souls to come into this realization. More on that in a second. Then I believe that there's a sense in which there is a path to doing this kind of work that is, in fact, going to be, in alignment with a bhakti path, which is all about love of God. I have to believe that because this is what I do for a living, and this is what my mentors, my guru, this is what people have told me in terms of the attitude to take toward what I do. And some of the verses they've pointed me to. Krishna then says, "O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again." So he goes on a little bit later in the chapter, and he says, "Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation all of their fruitive activities, which would be like things that they're going out and trying to do or hoping for or averse to. I want this, I don't want that. All of these things and their culture of knowledge, whatever they think they know, is ultimately defeated. So I have to think that if the more that as astrologers or as readers or even as clients of astrology that we are invested in what the Gita is calling fruitive activities, that this is a kind of diluted condition. And in that sense, even though divine intelligence of God is behind all things, we may not be we may be connecting with a lesser intelligence. Let's just or an intelligence that's not bringing us necessarily closer to God. Let's just say it like it is. Like in the ancient world, there are many ways, and there are many examples of this where, and there still are today, where there are soothsayers, prophets, psychics, mediums, channels, working with all sorts of spirits, entities, channels of information. But essentially, they're not doing so for any other reason than that they're bewildered by demoniac things that they're interested in. Demoniac in the sense wouldn't be like angels versus demons. It would be like deluded, bewildered, darkened states of consciousness that are guiding people's actions. Not that I'm free of this, I struggle with it too, but so the extent that you approach an oracle from that perspective, the higher chance, I would say, that whatever power you're working with is going to be a power that's more aligned with those kinds of things. So, I mean, and this is what I learned in the Amazon drinking ayahuasca as well, that if you're working with plant medicine or shamans and your primary interest is in gaining power, acquisition of skills, all sorts of things that are inherently about yourself and your own, intoxication with, I'm empowered or I'm disempowered or I need this or I need that or we need this for happiness. It's just all about us. Then there's a way in which the medicine's still the medicine. It'll do fantastic things. This ayahuasca will give gifts and insights and healings and blessings and all this stuff. But the spirits that you work with in those spaces are of a totally different nature. Dare I say the word vibration, right? But like they're of a different nature than, if you drink, in an ayahuasca setting, for example, where there's no goal. The hands are open. I'll receive whatever the divine would like me to receive in this ceremony this evening. And I've seen the difference in 10 years of drinking ayahuasca between people who go in with lots of power trips and agendas and the kinds of experiences they have, the dimensions of visionary experience, the portals of consciousness that are open, compared to people who go in essentially surrendered, just looking to become more humble, compassionate, loving, realized beings who want to love God and embody God's love in creation. It's just like it's a totally different kind of connection that ends up being established. So why wouldn't that happen if people were approaching, an oracle with the same differences of motivation? So, there's lots of examples in the Bible of prophets, and there's examples of people who are, working with spirits for the sake of power and selfish gain. In the yoga philosophy system, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, other examples too, and throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's said quite clearly that people can meditate, deep acts of meditation over long austerities, long periods of time that people are austere in order to get mystical powers, and they will get them. And these mystical powers are apparently sanctioned by, they come from God. But there's a different kind of consciousness that's cultivated, and there's a different kind of relationship and different beings, different kinds of teachers, different spirits, let's say, and let's say a different kind of result that comes when one approaches such things, saying, it's sort of less about my will, my wants, my needs. And it's more about, I don't know exactly what I need. I don't know exactly how to be of service. I'm not completely confident about my place in creation, but fill my cup. Tell me what to do. I'm yours. I'm your servant. Help me to become more whole. Help me to be more loving. See, when we're approaching from that standpoint, intentionally from that standpoint, it's as though there's a different intelligence that speaks through. So that's what I have to say about that. But then let's go on in this chapter a little bit more. He says, O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They're fully engaged in service because they know me as the supreme source, the personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. See, so he says quite clearly, like, people get different results depending on their motives and what and how they approach me. So he says, always chanting, or you could say praying, meditating on my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing before me. These are acts of love, not like austerity. These great souls worship me with devotion. So you see, that's the approach that works. He says, others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge, and this could be mystical knowledge, it could be, divinatory powers, whatever, that others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many and in the universal form. And then he goes on to say, but it is I who am the ritual, the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. So finally, I think the answer there is, look, I am astrology. I am the administrator. I am the karmic law that underrides the entire system of astrology. I am the beauty and intelligence of astrology. I am the very lifeblood of all the demigods of the planets. I am the grace and mercy that pours through, and I am ultimately where all diviners get any kind of information from. I'm the one who deludes souls when they want to be deluded and enlightens them when they're ready to be enlightened. Like, I'm ultimately behind all of these different approaches, all of these different ways of trying to know or understand. So, and then he kind of he kind of cuts to the chase. He says, I'm the father of the universe and the mother, the support and the grandsire. I'm the object of knowledge, the purifier and the syllable Om. He says, these all the Vedas. He says he's the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, and the most dear friend. I'm the creation and annihilation. I am the basis of everything, the resting place and the eternal seed. I give heat, I withhold and send forth the rain. I am immortality, and I'm also death personified. Spirit and matter are both in me. So, he goes on and on and on, talking about this. And then he says, just simply, anyone who worships me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. And so then he says, those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, but they do so in a wrong way. I'm the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. So any real or true knowledge that we get, whether we're using astrology or the I Ching or whatever, from the Bhakti standpoint, comes from God. So the oracle is God, ultimately. That if we don't approach with that awareness and that kind of established connection, we won't experience it like that. The way the information comes through won't necessarily be experienced like that and can actually entangle us more. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I wanted to work through those verses and just, walk you through some of the, some of the philosophical complexities of the question. I hope this has been helpful. To me, every day before I do my, my practices, or some, throughout the day as I'm doing my practices, I do my rounds on my beads. I chant, I read a chapter from the Bhagavad Gita. I read a chapter from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We serve our altar in our home with our deities. And so these practices keep me in a spirit of remembrance. This is who is the ultimate, anything that I come up with as a reader isn't because of my skill. It's because of some kind of grace. And I have to check my motivations, check my intentions, remember that I'm serving the souls of clients. Oh, one more thing. This is important. Some people might say, well, how productive is it to see people who are coming in and asking you about marriage or money or, these mundane things? How does entertaining that help them in the right direction? And the answer to that is actually something that the yoga philosophy addresses really directly. People are all at different stages of development. Better that someone approach an astrologer who's, kind of trying to cultivate God consciousness, not that I have it, but trying to cultivate God consciousness, Better that they consult an astrologer and ask about the nature of their experiences, the nature of their destiny. They're inherently asking about the nature of reality and the reality of things. And the role of the astrologer is to be someone who helps answer the questions about the mundane things, while reinforcing that it's God who's directing all of these things. I don't have to do that over. I don't have to hit my clients over the head with that, but it's the way that I talk about astrology. It's the way that I give people advice about how to deal with different seasons of life. It's the practices I recommend for people to work through different kinds of planetary dynamics. It's the attitude that we take toward the deities, understanding them as administrators of divine law, stuff like that. This is beautiful, sacred experiences. When you help people understand that that's what's behind whatever they're asking about, whatever the timing may be, whatever the unfolding of events may be, then there is a way in which over time a seed is being planted. People are starting to understand what's behind all of this, which is God's love and God's intelligence. So, and there's very similar things that are said in yoga philosophy about why different prescriptive rituals exist in the Vedas for getting things that look on the surface to be really selfish, like do this ritual to appease, the demigods and like get this thing. Well, why would it be like that if the Vedas themselves are pointing to the ultimate conclusion that God is at the root of everything? And, you'd save a lot of time by just devoting yourself to God in love without expectation or some kind of desired outcome. That's actually the quickest path to happiness. So why would the Vedas include all this other stuff? It's because people are at different places and different stages of growth and moving through things, and there's something for everyone. There's a way that God wants to talk to us wherever we're at. So I have to believe that anyway, because every day I try to do astrology in a way that helps point people home. So I think of the oracle when it speaks as some little piece of mercy coming down, especially through the sages, the God conscious, individuals over time who have received the sacred science, the mercy of God to bring such languages into creation. So I try to stay connected to that, and that's to me how the oracle stays in a God-centered place. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, if any questions you want to hear me, ramble on about Bhakti philosophy, I always love to talk Bhakti. So feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com, put Bhakti Q&A in the subject line. All right, that's what I've got for now. Hare Krishna.